This visual essay centers on the issue of the moving image. Part 1. Cinema of attraction versus narrative cinema. In the early years, the cinema itself was an attraction. Tom Gunning calls this the cinema of attractions, which bases itself on its ability to show something. The audience came to view the machines and the new technology rather than viewing the films themselves. The cinema of attraction was a concept that dominated the cinema until about 1906 or 1907, and according to Gunning, it did not disappear with the dominance of narrative, but rather went underground. The cinema of attraction has a different relationship with the audience than the narrative cinema. An example of this is how the actors in cinema of attraction repeatedly look at the camera, making contact with the audience. This action would, after the narrativization of cinema, be frowned upon, as it was perceived as spoiling the realistic illusion of cinema. The years 1907 to 1913 was the narrativization of cinema, and now film looked on stage theater as its main source of inspiration. It was now possible to create narratively meaningful camera techniques, namely intercutting actions and showing events from different angles. An example of this can be found in the book Film Art: An Introduction by Bordwell and Thompson, where they write about the film The Life of an American Fireman, which was one of the first films to use principles of narrative continuity and development. This was the beginning of what later would be called narrative cinema. Effects that in a cinema of attraction were playful tricks became, in narrative cinema, elements of dramatic expression, a way to tell the audience about the psychology of characters. Film started using effects for a different purpose. An example of this is how narrative cinema uses close-ups for narrative punctuation, whereas cinema of attractions use them as an attraction in its own right. Films of early cinema and online video clips are usually short films, mostly staying well under 10 minutes in length. A similarity with early cinema is that these online clips often work specifically to show. Kessler notes 3 characteristics of the cinema of attractions, which appear to be directly linked to this general orientation towards the spectator, namely, the gaze and gestures of actors directed towards the camera, the temporality, the frontality. These characteristics are truly visible in online videos as well, which concerns the showing of the self, the exhibitionist aspect of the cinema of attractions, getting a literal dimension. There are mostly 3 typical types of online original videos with a mode of attractional display. These are the musical display, a display of people performing stunts or tricks, a display of the power of nature. The non-original content available through online video collections is also mainly in the attractional mode, which consists mostly of the most attractional genres in cinema and television: music videos, movie trailers, and advertisements.
It's a tight ad.
One difference between early cinema and online clips is that early cinema was an event that required audience to put time aside to attend to the theater, while YouTube attractions are available anywhere and anytime. Another difference is that although YouTube clips arrest our attention through novelty and curiosity of the display itself, they also invite us to respond and participate in a variety of ways. The dialogic nature of video sharing sites produce a kind of hyper-attraction, as not only are subscribers invited to watch clips, but post comments or respond through video posts. A video dialogue between subscribers occur, which produces a new kind of attraction. Part 2. Immersion and interactivity. Tom Gunning states that with the emergence of cinema, there was the quest to deeply immerse the spectator within the movie, and to make the screen diminish. Gunning takes up examples of how Eisenstein and Marinetti wanted to exaggerate the impacts upon the spectators, such as gluing them to their seats and using firecrackers beneath them to enhance the experience. Andre Bazin brings up how Lumiere, Muybridge and Leroy Imagine cinema to be a total reflection and representation of reality, a reconstruction of a perfect illusion, a recreation of the world in its own image. As technology in games developed, the discoveries already done in cinema became more beneficial to the game industry. Flow in cinema is reliant on the technology, such as loudspeakers, lighting, and how it expresses the narrative to the spectator. Creating immersion in games relies on sight and sound, which is technology that cinema has developed for many years. Erkki Huttamo states that he wants to submerge the player with the flow and pull them along to diminish or remove the screen entirely, and have the player follow the current of events and remain invested in what is displayed. You won't be gazing at a movie screen, you'll find yourself swept right into the picture, surrounded by sight and sound. It's the quest for losing oneself in a simulated world, such as computer games, simulations, and special cinemas. Games utilize sound and interaction to pull the player through the story or the actions displayed on screen, and with help of the flow of the game, which immersion heavily relies on, they become attuned to the experience and pull along with it. Games and movies are artificially similar, but the main difference between the two visual mediums are interactivity. Games offer the first opportunity for the audience to truly interact with moving images on the screen. Earlier ways for the audience to interact with narratives have existed, but these could only be found in real-life social environments, like theater or shadowplay, where the audience could protest if they weren't happy with an event or found it too slow-paced. This could lead to changes in narrative. Erkki writes that traditional movies are almost impossible to design with meaningful ways for the audience to all interact with the movie, as tens or hundreds of people each need to have a say in how the movie should proceed. This, in essence, is called agency. In the book Story Playing, Agency and Narrative in Video Games, Sebastian Domsch writes, "When a player makes a decision in the game, the player chooses between at least two different paths, and with that choice, the player expects an altered path that the game will now follow. This is the fundamental difference between the two mediums. Movies don't have these multitude of possible paths the viewer have to choose between. Games and traditional films both have different levels of required insight, depending on the specific movie or game. Playing a game that is too complicated for your experience in that specific genre can be compared with viewing a film from a time period or genre that you don't have any insight in. Both of these situations can lead to a lack of engagement with the audience, and consequently, create a lack of immersion, which harms the experience."